I'm David Carr. I am fortunate to be the chair of EVV CON, the Elevate the Value of Virtual Conference, coming up on April 23rd. And I have with me the more famous and better looking Toastmaster named Carr, Mike Carr, who won the 2020 World Championship of Public Speaking. And right up front, I want to ask you, Mike, just give me the 60-second version of why you're coming to this event, what you're going to deliver, why people should attend.
Well, I appreciate the question. The reason I'm coming to the event is because virtual is here to stay, and it is the best platform to really connect people across this global landscape that we find ourselves, that we have invented up until this point. And don't trust me if you don't believe it. Seth Godin has come out and said, Zoom is the new telephone. It is the new, if not internet, the new email. It is the next version of the telephone. And it makes complete sense if you think about it, because you have only one level of communication, audio, on a telephone, but here you add then the visual, and you can see body language, even if it's not in 3D, even if there's not that touch, it adds a layer, and so it's here to stay. Also, companies have already figured out that rather than having two main conferences where they fly everybody in, they can have one big conference, and they can have multiple regional trainings and regional conferences, all through video, all virtual. So it's not only here to stay, but it's a great thing for human connection, for industry. It lowers the cost for industry while increasing the training. That's always a good thing. So many economic, human factors make it here to stay. And so why not get good at it? Why not why not practice it? Because the more reps we get, the more we practice on something, the more we improve that practice, the closer toward perfection, if there is such a thing, we can get. So yeah, that's the reason I'm excited about it. That's why it's important. That's why I'm coming, and hopefully I can share some things that help individuals, no matter what their goals are in life, help them to be able to be additive, get further down the road on all of those fronts.
All right. Well, I always wondered, I think I started to ask you this the other day, I didn't actually get an answer, were you horribly disappointed in 2020? Because I imagine as a public speaker, you had been competing for years, you dreamed of being on that big stage, and instead you were, what, in your living room talking to a camera?
It was actually, the interesting part was when I won, when I discovered that I won, I was standing by myself in my master bathroom, and I happened to look down at my phone, and I saw my picture up at the top of that triangle, and I kind of looked around and went, oh, wow. And I actually audibly, I said, oh man. And my daughter heard me from the other room and said, what? So I went out and we jumped together. I think there were three of us. Yeah. So I horribly disappointed. No, not netted horribly disappointed, because it's always fun to be the world champion of anything, the world champion of public speaking. Yeah. If you love storytelling, if you love the one-to-many interaction, then to be able to do that. Also, there's something really innovative and magical about trying to work on the constraints of this format and say, how could I do something different? It's like, I'm not comparing myself to Shakespeare, but part of the genius of Shakespeare is in his iambic pentameter, he had that very tight structure, and it was that structure, those constraints, that brought out then the magic and the art. So there was even if a perverse fun of trying to figure out, okay, what are the strengths of this medium? And I've been speaking, I have to be honest, I've been speaking oh goodness, I built my first business doing financial seminars. I've been speaking for 25 or more years, 30 years, I guess even before that, professionally and non, and love the energy of that big stage, and had always thought about being in front of a ballroom of 3,000 and managing that energy
Right.
that way.
And
So
instead you're talking to this glass eye that's not giving you anything back, right?
Right. But then on the flip side, also, it's a constrained in that big ballroom. You can only fit 3,000 in there. And on the day that I got to compete, I forget how many they said, north of 20,000, 60,000. I've forgotten it, multiples of the number that would have been in that ballroom. And so I had a message that I really thought could impact some people. And it got to be to a multiples of the people that I could have spoken to that day. So there are trade-offs. Yes. Right. So one of these days, though, I'm excited to shake your hand at a conference, and maybe they'll give me an opportunity to just say hi to the big audience.
Right. Well, I mean, I just remember some of these moments, and you've already alluded to this, of working with the camera frame. And I haven't seen that many other people do it the way that you did it. Now, how did that all evolve, that whole physical? I wondered if you had acting background or mime training or anything like that would prepare you for figuring out how to do all the physical blocking that you did in that presentation or that speech.
I've been in Toastmasters for now a little over 25 years. So I've had a lot of practice on blocking on a stage, and I've always wanted to use the entire speaking area and an entire stage that way. So when this became the stage, then I did start playing with that. To answer your question directly about theater, I did a little bit of theater in high school, and did some of that, and we did some blocking. But I would say mostly it's the practice since then on storytelling, having, if I'm telling part of the story here and then part of the story over here, whether the stage is this wide or 3 times this wide, it noticing that it helped the audience follow along better visually that way. So to also your question, I had 2 speeches when I entered the contest. When I entered the contest, it was in person in the club and the area. And then all of a sudden, we didn't know if the contest was going to go away. We didn't know what was going to happen. It went virtual. So I had that second speech, like I always have going into contest season. And it was a speech that was practiced and designed for a super wide stage in a ballroom of 3,000. So that at some points I was working toward the very back person in that ballroom, running all over that stage. And when I surprised myself, got the call that I was moving on to the finals, I practiced that final speech that I had written in this space, and it was boring. I bored myself. I watched it with sound, and I was bored. I turned off the sound. I was even more bored, and I thought, I've got to scrap it. I've got to figure out something. And that's when I started looking at this square and said, okay, this is very limited, right? But what's not limited? What's the strength of this medium? I can go as far back as I want to. I could come right up and have an intimate conversation with every single person in the audience. I even asked the judges one time, we were going forward, I said, what part, I asked the chief judge, that's right, I was saying in our briefing, I said, what part of my body has to be in frame? And does any part of my body be in frame? And no one had asked that question. And they were saying, well, you have to at least, I said, is this okay? Can I just have nothing? And they said, no, It's not in the rule book, but no. So I said, well, how about this? Is that okay? They said, oh, well, yeah, okay. If you have some of your, and so that's part of the reason why when I came to the side and it's the sheriff poos that big heavy door, at least
Right.
my fingers are in the frame. But
Yeah,
but
it
that,
would have been a shame if your fingers slipped. It'd be like a footfall.
I know. I know. Yeah. Yeah.
You shouldn't have asked the question. They wouldn't have had a rule, but
That's right. That's right.
they formulated it for you.
That's right.
No, I
And
understand. You make your living as a financial advisor, as a wealth manager. You mentioned giving presentations on preserving your wealth and so forth. So you had been speaking professionally in that format, and you've probably been doing a lot of those things on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever. Now, I don't imagine you bring, the librarian and Mrs. Montgomery action into those professional presentations too often. But what is it that carries forward? What are you taking from your experience speaking online in Toastmasters that also translates to those professional settings?
right. I'd say the main thing is that I'm trying to continue to push the envelope and encourage others to do so also because of the creativity that can happen here. So, for example, you said, you imagine that I don't bring the hijinks of the librarian and Mrs. Montgomery into speech, but I've been speaking a lot to banks, but was recently brought in by a technology company that is all online. And they asked me to do their sales kickoff, and it was their global sales kickoff. It was all online. I happened to be in Denver, and so I set up everything with the curtain behind me. But I didn't plan originally to be in Denver. I was going to be here in this room. It's just I had another meeting. It was a executive retreat I was going to be facilitating. So I started looking at the room, and the room had a glass shower in the bathroom. So I called up my contact who was bringing me in, and I said, hey, I've got a squirrely idea. Do you mind if I try it? And he heard it and he said, I don't know if it'll work, but go for it. And he said, just as long as if it doesn't work, right, I can blame you. It's like, I had no idea. And I said, done. It's the deal. I'm glad. And what I did was I gave the first part of the speech. If you can imagine that there was the window behind me with a curtain drawn. I had a long extension cord. I had lights, and I was talking about taking risk, building grit in a sales environment. And I said sometimes that, the world gets bad and you just have to migrate. And I picked up my computer and I started walking with this long extension cord. And I walked into the bathroom and I sat the computer down on the vanity there. And I was saying, sometimes you have to migrate to where the light is better. And then sometimes it gets really nasty. And I stepped inside the shower and I turned it on fully clothed and doused myself in water and ended up wrapping it up. And I could say I had all the little boxes all over the screen, and different people were looking away. Man, when I got in the shower fully clothed, every eye was on me. Like, what is this fool doing? And then I was able to say, look,
yeah,
if I can take a risk by getting in the shower fully clothed on a global sales kickoff, when you're in a sales engagement and you've got to stick to your price and take a risk or ask for more, you remember back to that fool who got in the shower on a global sales kickoff, and you go,
yeah,
it did not kill him. And it won't kill you either when you take the risk in a sales engagement. And the guy, the CEO, loved it. He called the guy who brought me in. He said, that was awesome. I want to send him a bottle of wine. And then my contact, said, call me, that the shower thing really worked. But it was, so it's that kind of thing. I start thinking, you can't do that on stage live, right? You can only do that in virtual.
Yeah.
And that is where the value of virtual then is consistently elevated, because we can do stuff like that and we can make points like that that help people excel that we could not do if they were sitting at the back of a ballroom of 3,000 people. So continuing to do that kind of stuff, seeing how taking the risk in the contest worked out, and then trying it in a corporate speaking environment, it gave me more courage to try it in a corporate speaking environment, and that worked out. And now I'm saying, can I jump out of a plane with a live GoPro going and parachute into a stage of 3,000? Does that work? And there are people out there who are doing so much more than me. There was a guy whose speech was about parachuting, and he's doing this way up in the camera. I thought, I never thought about that. That's brilliant. So creativity is spiraling, and it's beautiful.
I'm curious, have you gotten into situations where you're doing hybrid presentations, where you're speaking to an online audience, but you've got an in-person audience too, and somehow you're supposed to keep both of them engaged? That strikes me that is going to be happening more and more, and it's difficult.
Right. I think that's exactly right. And the reverse, where you're in person and it's a hybrid meeting, and you're speaking to a group that's online, and when there is a core, there's a group that's in person, and you're coming in virtually. And that's a different skill set as well, because it has to engage that entire audience. And that's where I haven't cracked that. I don't feel like I've cracked that code yet, but I'm excited to try some things, because if I don't crack it, somebody's going to, and really be able to play with the in-person audience from a virtual experience. But I did do a conference where it was virtual, and they had cameras set out. I guess if I was up on stage, there was one out here and one, I think, over. So they got side shot of me, and then one that came up this direction. And is part of the question then, how did I navigate that? Is that what you're asking as well?
Well, I was asking you whether you had cracked the code, or whether you had some advice, or at least some lessons that you've learned so far in those situations.
Right. And I've experimented some with that. That was in person. And I did a couple of things. One, I treated the camera as another audience member, but I made sure that I treated the camera like an important audience member. So typically what I try to do is, I'm looking around an in-person room, I try to speak over here and talk really just to one person for a little bit, and then look over here and speak really only to one person, and then maybe right over here and speak to one, and then right over here. But I want to make sure that about every third or fourth time I'm speaking to this person, we tell a story and the audience laughs, and I look over and I find the camera, and I want to talk to this person.
Right.
I want to talk to the camera a little bit more, and then I'm going to look over here and talk, and then one more, and then back. And so I might rest on other people, individuals in the in-person audience once or twice in the entire presentation, but I want to come back to that camera and treat that as the VIP in the room about every third or fourth time, because many times what we're finding is, a lot of times they may only have 500, where they might have had 3,000 in the ballroom before. A company or an association might only have 100 to 500 in the room, but then might have 6,000 on the hybrid. So you're speaking to, so that's one. The second thing that I ended up trying in this group, and I got feedback that it worked really well, was the camera. Let's see if I can, it was sitting, if I was up on the stage, it was sitting over here, right? And so I'm talking to the audience members. I'm trying to talk to it every now and again. And then I told a story where, how would be the best way to replicate this? Let's see, I have all my wires here. I told a story. Oh maybe it'll stretch. The camera's over here. So the second key is to remain nimble because things can happen like the earbuds flying out. But I was speaking, up on the stage. This is about the angle it was getting. I'm talking to people and the camera. And then I started telling the story that I went where I was in college, and I went and I sat down in the dean's office and had a conversation with the dean, and the dean's talking with me, and I'm sitting back and I'm listening to the dean, and he says to me, well, Mike, what do you have to say for yourself? And I looked right at him and I said, sounds like good stuff, which was a callback to a previous line I'd had in the story and got a big laugh. But then what I was doing was I was acting like I was sitting in front of the dean. Mm-hmm. The in-person audience is all, if you're in the virtual audience of that, they are all back behind you and over here. And I'm just sitting, and it was really more like right up, I'm sitting down in front of the camera. And there was a point where I said, I said that the dean said, well, Mike, what do you have to say for yourself? And I just went, sounds like good stuff. And laughter starts going, and I just stay there. So I'm not looking at the in-person audience. I'm looking right at playing with, acting like I'm talking to the dean right there, and I'm fully focused on the virtual audience. It's completely zeroed in on the virtual.
Whole audience is in on the joke, I guess. That's
right.
That's the important thing.
Yeah. But at that moment, then they have up on the screens what the virtual audience is seeing. And the virtual audience then, I'm sorry, they have up on the screens in person what the virtual audience is seeing. Out of the corner of my eye, I can see that in the in-person audience, during that part of the story, no one is looking at me in person. They're all looking at the screen. So all of a sudden, I've brought the entire audience into the virtual space. And so what the feedback, and I didn't know if it would work, quite honestly. I didn't know if sorry, I'm pulling all my cords back now. I didn't know if it would work, but the feedback that I got back was that those who were in the virtual audience, they felt like they were not second-class citizens. They felt like that they were a part of the entire hybrid experience because I had part of the engagement solely for them. Mm-hmm. Me doing that on stage in person would not have been as effective as me doing it right here in front of the camera, having it projected up on stage. So that's what I would say to your audience. And I want to say to our group when we talk about this is there are people way more creative than I am out there. If we think about those concepts, mm-hmm. People are going to come up with some amazing stuff.
Okay. Now, I'm curious whether you make any special use of presentation technology or webcam technology. I mean, I'm using a virtual background right now, and I'm sitting in front of the computer where you're standing. That's supposed to be better for a speaker to be standing, but I want people to go over to evvcon.com and sign up for the event. I'm branding here, but how much do you mess around with that stuff? Is it interesting to you, or do you try and stay away from it? And I mean, I think, your face is the most powerful special effect you have to work with, but do you do any of this other fancy whiz bang techno stuff?
I have not yet. Now I have a subscription to, if you've run into that technology where it can run your slides back behind you, so you can be in a weatherman format and do some other on that. We're experimenting, my wife and I. My wife is a speaker also, and in kind of a different space. And so we're looking at getting different camera angles, and really would have already, if the finance business hadn't been. We're in the middle of tax season, by the way, when this is being recorded. So
Yes.
it's
We spoke about that.
right.
Hopefully good problems to solve that you're making you fabulously rich, and you're somewhere in there.
Well, not the fabulously rich part yet, but but so we're looking at items like that, and have experimented a little bit with that.
Mhm.
But how do I say? It's kind of like, I've just lost the other world champion. What he has said, what he's talked about, I think he's still the youngest world champion of public speaking. But I heard him, one of the things he talked about was, and one of my good friend, David Henderson, that he talks to, he wears costumes and different, wears costumes a lot, but they both say the same thing about props and about costumes, is they say, don't use a prop just to have a prop.
Right.
And David Henderson says, don't wear a costume just to wear a costume. Wear a costume if it allows you to take words out of your speech that can just be said verbally, not verbally, visually.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
You're able to say things. And so I'm experimenting with the medium on trying to do different things outside, blowing the wall back out and doing some other things. And then when I can't really make my point, there have been times when I have, for example, the only point that I would make is a point about one of my kids. Instead of putting a picture up behind me or screen sharing, because that happens a lot. A lot of people are doing that. What I did instead was pulled up my daughter's picture and put it right up there like that in the screen.
Yep.
So it has the same effect, but it's a little different feel. So
a little more physical, a little more personal, maybe.
Right. And right now I'm erring to the side of those things because, but that's also part of what I'm told is kind of part of my speaking style is I kind of like being real. I like people seeing the books on my shelf and my granddad's cowboy hat and the mess on that table over there.
You do a lot of selfie video that I see out on social media, which they're just short. They're usually just a few thoughts that you wanted to put together, something you wanted to say. Can you talk to me a little bit about why you do that and how you do that?
Yeah, part of that is those are things that I want to, I guess it would be three reasons I do that. Those are all things that typically I'm going through my day and I'm needing to remind myself of to live a better life. I'm really trying, I'm working on in my own life, trying to find that balance between being as productive as I can be, and at the same time living peacefully and having a great degree of happiness. And I end up, by nature of what I do, both the consulting side and also the money management side, I end up working with and having a lot of friends that have a lot of wealth and have accomplished a ton of things and are selling companies and starting companies. And a lot of them are they're either far on one side of that or another. They are very productive and incredibly miserable and unhappy. And then there comes a time when they just kind of chuck it all and go to Tibet or go to the Holy Land, go to Israel, or go to, go and live on a mountain in Colorado, and they do nothing for a few years and they come back and, oh no, I need to start a company again. And I go, whoa. There's wisdom literature in antiquity that where people have cracked that code. So there are things that there are things that I'm telling myself. Those are the things that I post, or things that I'm telling myself and I need to hear every day. Secondly, I don't know if do you have kids, David?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You know how much they listen to you when they hit a certain age and beyond, right?
Yeah.
But I notice that every time I post, every one of my kids goes and views my post on one of those social media channels, and sometimes on multiple. And so it's another way that I can share with them things that were hard-learned lessons through my life hopefully without them feeling preached at.
Okay.
And then finally, I heard Seth Godin talk about this some years ago about just giving gifts. These are things that have helped me through life, and so I assume they won't help the majority out there, but there are at least a handful or some people who look at the world the way I do, and I hope that it helps them get through a day, or it helps them improve their lives a little bit. And it's seasonal, right? There are friends of mine that for the longest time say, I thought it was silly, everything you posted. And then one day, what you said, I really had to hear. It was really for me. It's like, okay, that's worth it. So it's those three things are the reasons that.
Now, I told you a little bit about the webinar contest that we're doing, which is sort of like the contest where you had your chance to excel. But the rules are tweaked a little bit to specifically look at, are you able to create engagement in an online speech? Which
I think is great.
Because you are speaking through this piece of glass, and there are all these barriers in place. One of the things is we have somebody assigned to be a chat monitor to keep track of things that people might post into the chat, so that you don't have to do that, multitask quite that much. But people do have license to use a green screen or to use fancy Prezi techniques. And I am trying to tell people too that it's not that you should do these things, it's just that you have permission to do them. We're not pretending that it's a speech that was meant to be given on stage and we just happen to be recording it. This is your speech that you designed to be wonderful and effective online. Do you have any advice for the people who will be competing in that about how they should craft it, how they should think through the process?
Yes. Take risks. If David Carr has told you can do X, do 2X. Anywhere your imagination can go, try it, because I did not believe that I could win the World Championship of Public Speaking that year for a number of reasons. Other people in the contest, where I fell in the contest. And so what I was just trying to do was to create a video that I could use for industry that said something, that really said something into the world. And that was it, because I knew that I was not going to win. And so I took risks. And it was that very thing that judges and everyone else came back and said, oh my goodness, that was the differentiator. And that's what happened. So, the individuals who are going to be in this contest, it's like a showcase. I'm sure that they can get a video, and it's a great part to get a beautiful, high quality video that they can take and they can present. They can either have as just something in their own personal archive that their grandkids say, oh, look at this neat piece of art that grandma or grandpa, put together way back when we didn't have the holograms. We did, but they weren't able to, appear before us in person. Or even better, something that then can be taken to education or to nonprofits or to industry, and to really showcase what you can do in this medium. And there are tons of companies. I'm telling you, I run into them all the time that are continuing to say, if you can say something, entertain me, and make me laugh a little bit, then that's a valuable commodity in today's world, because we don't have to fly you out. We don't have to, and regional conferences are proliferating. So that's why I would say, take risks, try things, really work on that message, and it builds into the creative ecosystem that we all.
I don't know about that dial it up to 2x, 3x thing. I don't want the screen to be bleeding. I don't want anybody to be.
That's a great idea.
Special effects coming out of this, but
now that's a great idea. Now I'm going to have to make my screen bleed in the next presentation that I do. I hadn't even thought about that. That's amazing.
All right. Well, one more time. I'm David Carr. I am fortunate to be here with Mike Carr, the 2020 World Champion of Public Speaking, notable in many other ways. Not a relative as far as we know, but Mike, tell me one more time. Give me the 60-second version. Why are you coming to this conference? Why are you excited about it? What are you going to be bringing to
it? If I could give you telephone training before the telephone came out, you would multiply your effectiveness in your relationships, in your business, in your own training. And that's what's happening right now in the world, that the virtual medium opens doors that we can't even see. And it's being embraced. It's been embraced. We are on the doorstep of that. And this conference explores that. It gives opportunity for you to see creativity and allow yourself to think, ooh, that's cool. How can I do that? Or what's my version of that? And it practices all of that. So whether it's just building relationships across the world with extended family, like I happen to have now in Japan, or it is building a whole new business, then it's just a valuable commodity to come in, get reps, get inspiration, and see what the next level of entrepreneurs are doing in this space.